Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined, they're built brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
Welcome back to the Big Life Podcast. I'm Neal Oates Jr. and I'm joined as always by my thoughtful and powerful co-host, Mr. Robin Lewis. Robin, how are you today?
Hey man, I'm doing great, Neal. I'm so excited, actually.
Of course you're excited because we're having a conversation today that you and I believe are long overdue.
Yes, sir. We're tackling a big one today, folks. So today we're talking about the myth of busyness and how we often confuse it with real progress. And so we've titled it today that from busy to effective, redefining productivity for purposeful living. Because let's be honest, most of us are busy. Most of us are doing a lot. But the question is, are we actually moving forward?
Robin, I'm glad that you posed that question to the audience because I don't want them tuning out or checking out simply because I'm the one that said that. But seriously, Robin and I, we do believe that this is a valuable and necessary conversation to have. And so we're thrilled that you would be here. And so really, that's the key question. Are we actually moving forward? I am a believer that we live in a world that glorifies being busy. Right? Full calendars, constant motion, and this thing called margin, but a very little margin, Robin. So we aren't building that space into our lives, into our calendars. And it makes us look productive. And we know that looks can be deceiving, but looking busy isn't the same as living on purpose. And I know that living on purpose is a key goal. It is a desired outcome and result of the big life. So we want to live on purpose. So I'm going to ask Robin, since I have you being the coach here, being the leader, would you just talk about the busyness trap that maybe we either find ourselves in now or we've found ourselves in at some point in our past?
Well, Neal, as we dive into that, let's start with this. Let me ask you, why do you think so many people are addicted to being busy?
See, look, ladies and gentlemen, Robin put it right back on me. So I'm just going to give you my opinion. I think that part of it is cultural conditioning. And so I can only speak from my experience and what I'm seeing around me. Really, we're taught to measure our value by how much we do. Right. And I know that this is not something that you and I believe, being a child of God, children of God. We believe that our value comes in whose we are and who we are. But many of us are taught to measure our value by how much we do. And somewhere along the way, rest became laziness. Right. And though, even though God rested on the seventh day, we're sitting here trying to go and go and go. And now if we do rest, or when we rest, it looks as being lazy, and then overload, putting too much on our calendar, too much on our plates. That has become honorable. That is like a badge of honor that we should wear. And to me, it seems a little bit out of the plan. And so I would love to hear what your opinion is there, Rob.
That's so true, man. I agree. And it can even become a kind of identity, right? So in other words, I'm busy becomes the automatic response to every question. We kind of that's just who we are. It's a part of our identity, right? It makes us feel important. We feel needed, like, we're doing something relevant. But underneath that is often, we're fatigued and maybe even resentment. Sometimes you find yourself doing something, but you're doing it with a resentful attitude. Or do you find yourself doing things that maybe are putting you out of alignment? So you're doing things, you're busy and you're doing things, but you're doing things that are not necessarily what you truly value. And so, yeah, I think it's right. But it's become this identity, man. Like, I'm busy. Yeah.
And so here's what I think about anytime I think about busyness. And then you mentioned fatigue, resentment, misalignment. But how much of this happens because we don't just slow down, right? Because we don't pause and we don't reflect, and then we aren't thinking about our week. And then what happens is that busyness becomes one identity, and then it becomes this mask, right? A way to avoid stillness. And I know we believe this, that one of the most important things that we can do in our daily lives is just be still, right? To sit in the stillness so that one, we can build that relationship, strengthen that relationship, that intimate time with God. But many of us are not okay being still, right? It's a way for us to avoid clarity. And whether we agree or we do it intentionally or not, it's a way for us to avoid healing, right? Many of us have hurts and aches and pains emotionally or even spiritually, that we wear this mask of busyness so we don't have to deal with the healing process. And healing is a process, because it's my belief that when we stop, we're left with ourselves. And I can speak from personal experience that I don't always like myself. And maybe you're in that place where if I'm left with myself, that might be an uncomfortable place. And so that's something that is going to require maturity from us to say, I need to be still. I need to heal. I need to gain clarity, but that's only going to happen when we sit with ourselves and then face that mirror.
Yes, that's so true, brother. And so let's talk about busy versus productive now for a moment. Let's define the difference between being busy and being effective. How do we know when we've crossed the line, Neil, between busy and effective?
So I think of two words. I think of activity and results, right? And so busy is about activity. So like if we're moving, if we're doing this thing, and so it's called active non-action, right? Busy is about activity, but effective or effectiveness is about results. So busy says, look at how much I'm doing. Effective says, here's what's getting done that actually matters. And so we can do a lot that doesn't matter. So we could be busy, but not effective. And Peter Drucker says all this, or he was quoted as saying the idea that there's nothing as bad as doing that effectively that which shouldn't be done at all. Right. So that just means that if we're doing the wrong thing, no matter how good we are, that's busyness. But we really do want to work on that effectiveness, being effective. And that's, here's what's getting done that actually matters. And so I ask myself on a daily basis or even hourly, how much of what I'm doing actually matters?
Yeah, and recently, Chris Robinson, we had him on our episode here, and he talked about this motion without meaning, right? And by the way, let's put in a plug for that for Chris Robinson's
Come on,
work.
man.
Why don't we? From drift to drive, and that's how we can recognize that we might be complacent in some areas of our lives. And maybe we might be a part of complacency is about being busy, but not necessarily being productive.
So Robin, before you go any further, ladies and gentlemen, that episode with Chris Robinson was episode 38 from Drift to Drive. And we're going to encourage you to go from drifttodrivebook.com, drifttodrivebook.com. Chris Robinson has laid out a fantastic work, and it's not only for leaders. We believe that it is for everyone who is doing this thing called life with someone else. And hopefully that's all of us. And so thank you for just giving me that opportunity just to mention drifttodrivebook.com,
Right
Chris
on.
Robinson, and episode 38 right here of the Big Life Podcast.
Great stuff. Because that's the shift that we're talking to you about today that we want you to make is to shift from performing for productivity's standpoint to living with purposeful intention. Because productivity without purpose is just motion without meaning.
Robin, right there. I know you and I, we talk about maturity a lot, development, growth, but that requires a big person, right? And ladies and gentlemen, if you aren't there yet, maybe you're at the point where you're saying, hey, yes, I'm not just busy, I'm productive, I'm effective, right? But what Robin and I are asking you to do as a listener or a viewer of the Big Life podcast, we're asking you to have a goal bigger than effectiveness or just productivity for the sake of productivity itself. We're asking you to seek after living with purposeful intention. And that's a very big difference from just effectiveness itself. But Robin, this is where burnout lives, right? And unfortunately, maybe there were seasons in our lives where we were right at the brink of burnout or even experienced it. But when your energy is going everywhere, but your impact is going nowhere, where we're doing all of this action, but we're seeing no growth. We're seeing no progress. Being effective means we start aligning effort with mission, not just maintenance. And Robin and I believe the purpose of this podcast, the Big Life podcast, is for us to be on mission. It's not just for us to be in a maintenance pattern.
Yes, and it's so true. And so Neal, let's share. Let's share from a personal vantage point now. Anything come to mind for you? Like, was there a season when you felt trapped in busyness but weren't actually being effective? And we don't.
I mean,
Trap doesn't
so
have to be the word, but you found yourself in a busyness season and you recognize that maybe you weren't actually being effective.
absolutely. I could go as far back as the very beginning of my real estate business, my coaching business, or I could go back to yesterday in full transparency. But the idea is typically the same, right? So, regardless of the time, it's always when I'm working on these things, networking, posting social media content, emailing, having a full calendar. And so I often say that I'm a slave to my calendar, right? And because I want to make sure that I'm productive, that I'm doing the right thing, but that's not always the case because what I realized was that my calendar was full, but my needle was not moving, right? The things that make a difference, it was like I was making no progress. And this isn't from a position where I'm like, I'm not making any progress. Woe is me. Like I was doing stuff, but it was just the wrong stuff. And it wasn't until I started identifying what really mattered. It wasn't until I slowed down. It wasn't until I reflected, until I journaled, until I really looked at the big picture that you mentioned, not getting stuck in the small day to day. That's when I started connecting with the right clients. I started building the right systems. I started deepening relationships, and that's when things shifted for me. But it really was all about what we talked about in a previous episode, the perspective, and me saying, let me get the right perspective. Let me look and see what really moves the needle, and let me stop doing busy work, but let me start doing impact work.
Yes. Right on. Thank you for sharing, sir. I think it's good for our listeners to hear when we're real with them as well. And it's funny, it's I actually mentioned this. I'm going to share from my vantage point, Neal. I remember sharing this when on the same episode with Chris, we were talking about goals, and I don't know if you remember, he was saying that we're when depending upon when our listeners are listening to this, in what part of the year you're in, but Chris suggested to go back to the beginning of the year and look at your goals and consider, first of all, he said, if you can even find them. Right.
Right. So Robin, that right there hit me. I'm like, dang, okay, I can't even get to the next part of your statement because I got to go back and find my goal sheet from the beginning of
Exactly.
the year.
Right. And then when you find them and you're looking at them, look at your daily agenda and look at how you're doing. If is what you're doing in your daily agenda actually moving you closer to those goals? And Neal, this is the part that I said it on the podcast, but I'm going to share a little bit more about it here. One of my goals for this year that we're recording this was to get back to a place, and I've shared this with you, Neal, where I have gotten back into that place where I'm budgeting. You remember me saying this to you?
Yes, sir.
And that was a goal for me. And Neal, when I look at my calendar, the reality is there's a lot of things. It's one of those things, if I can be honest with you, is it's like, I don't, if I have to choose between going and putting stuff in a spreadsheet versus going and speaking with a client or doing something else like that, I'm going to choose,
You're
speaking
going to
with the
choose a
client.
something else 100% of the time, right, Robin?
And so what I've done, Neal, is I've kind of just put that off. So I've been busy. And yes, I've been busy focusing on some of the other goals that I have. It's not the only goal. And I'm making progress, good progress on some of the goals that I have. But if I can be honest with you, this is a perfect example is where I'm busy. And yes, some of that busy is good, but I'm not effective with one of the goals that I have set for myself to achieve this year. And so that's an example for me. And so it calls me, you know what? I'll just give an example. I have it on my calendar right now. So I'm being fully transparent to our listeners. I have it on my calendar. Something as simple. Some of you will laugh at me, you listeners, but I have it on my calendar to open the spreadsheet. You've heard. I have to laugh
Come
just
on.
saying it. I have to laugh
No,
just
you
saying
no,
it.
you
But
don't. We got to take them baby steps, Rob. Come on, man.
here's the concept. You know how they say, when you've got away from the gym, it's the hardest thing to get back. I'm applying that concept to this. And so I heard our mentor, Roddy Galbraith, said, if you want to get back to the gym, all you got to do is just get dressed today. Don't even drive to the gym. Just get dressed like you're going to go to the gym. And the next day you get dressed again. And you continue doing that. And then you might graduate to where you're going to drive to the gym. You're not even going to go in, but you're going to drive to the gym and then you come back home. But you got dressed and now you also drove to the gym. And then the next time you're going to go inside, right? You got the point. So that's where I'm at with this thing. So my thing on my calendar right now is open the spreadsheet. And if I can be even more transparent, Neal, at the time of you and I recording this, I haven't done it today yet. So, that's where I am at. So that's
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and share something about my brother Robin Lewis. Now that he has shared that with you all, but especially me, here's what I know for a fact. The spreadsheet will be open today because now he has shared with me, and I am the best, worst accountability partner, just like he is for me. If nothing more, Robin will let himself off the hook. What he will not do is Robin has yet to disappoint Neal Oates. Neal Oates will let himself off the hook, but I will not disappoint Robin Lewis. So, Robin, I am excited because now that we know, all you have to do is get dressed today by opening the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet will be open, and then we will be starting our streak. We will say number one, check, and then we'll move from there.
amen.
Because you do know that my next question, before you proactively decided to go ahead and initiate, I was going to say, so Robin, let's get it on the air. When are we going to start this process?
Yeah.
But
I know you're
in
you're good.
truth,
It's good to have you in my life, brother, because you've definitely helped me with that. And our listeners, you need somebody like that in your life. I think one of the things that we definitely want and need is somebody to help keep us accountable.
yes,
That's
sir.
that's going to go a long way from busyness to effectiveness, is to have people in your life that keep you accountable. So thank you for being that person for me, sir.
So let's park right there talking about these accountability partners or success partners. So not all of our audience has a Robin or Neal in their life. They might not have a personal relationship. And this is where, ladies and gentlemen, Robin and I, we believe in the value of coaching, right? And so I know that some of you are going to say, well, coaching is expensive. Well, not being coached, not having an accountability partner is more expensive than getting someone that's going to hold you accountable, that's going to remind you of what the promises you made to yourself. So if you don't have someone that's in your life right now, seek someone out. Find someone to do life with that's going to lovingly but sternly hold you to your word, because we are great salespeople, every one of us. And the reason I know is that we will sell ourselves on why we should or shouldn't do it, even when it's not in our best interest. So, yes, Robin and I are coaches, but we're not telling you to use us. But if you want great coaches, you should have conversations. Our contact info is in the show notes. But find a coach. If you don't have a personal relationship with someone, that will hold you accountable to keep those promises to yourself. So right now, Robin, I would love for us to really just put out here for our audience maybe 4 questions to redefine productivity, right? And so I'm going to start here. I want to give some reflection questions because we understand the value of reflecting to maybe help move them from busy to effective. And so the first question is directly related to what Robin just mentioned. And this is something that Chris Robinson had us ask ourselves: is what I'm doing aligned with my purpose? Right now, some of you might be in a position, you're like, Neal, I don't know what my purpose is. We're going to encourage you to get some of that quiet time, get still with God so that you can figure out what your purpose is, right? Maybe instead of purpose, maybe you read goal. So is what I'm doing aligned with my goal? Robin had to answer that question. I had to answer that question. And we had to sit with our goals after we found them. And we had to ask that question: is what I'm doing aligned with my purpose? And I want to share this second one before I kick it over to Robin. But is this task moving me closer to a meaningful outcome? Right. So the task might be moving you closer to an outcome, but is this task moving me closer to a meaningful outcome? I think those are 2 great questions of the 4. Robin, you want to continue, sir?
Yes, sir. The third one is, am I doing this because it's important or just because it's expected? So that's
Hold on, Robin.
clarifying the importance. Yeah, that's a good one, right?
Robin, man. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what Robin is not saying, if it's expected from your boss or your employer, it might be important to your position, right? But go ahead and read that and share that one with the audience one more time, Robin, because I think there is a big difference between expectation and
Oh
importance.
yeah, without a doubt. And there's so many things now that are might be expected that are not important, right? We're expected to respond to that WhatsApp chat. We're expected to respond to that social media chat. We're expected, and Neal, I could just go on and on and on and on with just those types of things. And but is that important? Right? If it's getting in the way of the important, then that's what we're saying we have to ask ourselves about. And then the last one is, what would change if I stopped doing this? What would change if I stopped doing this? And we can ask ourselves that question about anything that we are doing, right? We're whatever task we find ourselves doing on a daily basis. What would change if I stopped doing this? So if you're really
So
being able to tune in on the importance of what it is that you're doing with that question. That's a great question. Yes,
So,
sir.
Robin, I want you to keep going because I think that as you finish those last 2 of the 4 questions, maybe it has us thinking. And so now what happens?
Yeah, so I mean those questions help us to shift our whole approach to, how we're spending our time, right? It helps us to really consider if what we're doing is important. And so one that I can add to this as well, Neal, is my busyness serving me, or is it serving my mission? Is it serving me looking good, feeling good? Like, is it serving my ego, or is it serving my mission? Because that distinction is also very real.
That answer, ladies and gentlemen, is so it's not an easy answer, right? If we're going to be honest, and if it is serving your ego, you might have to start asking, why do I need this to serve my ego? If it's serving your mission, why am I not going hard, or why am I not doing this more frequently or more consistently? And all of that is so good. And so, how do we start building a life of effectiveness instead of busyness? And so now we're going to give some practical strategies. You all know that Robin and I, we might look the part, but we are not intellectuals. We are individuals who want to apply and leave our audience, to leave you all, much like our coaches and mentors have left us, with something to do so that we can be better. So, Robin, I would love to hear maybe some practical strategies that you might be able to share with the audience, sir.
Yes, sir. Very good. These are good. I think one is to define your priorities weekly. I do mine on Sunday evenings now, Neil. There are times in my life where I've been very consistent, sometimes not so consistent. I'm in a season now where I'm very consistent with this because it's so helpful for my
Yeah.
week. Is I take time on a Sunday and I define what my priorities are for this week. So this way I'm not allowing my to-do list to set my values, right? I'm choosing ahead of time. These are 2 or 3 priorities that matter the most for this upcoming week. And so it allows me to give those my best energy. I can be intentional. I can block it on my calendar as you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier that you do very well. And but it also helps me to what I'm not going to allow to get in the way, because these are the priorities and this is where I want to spend my best energy this week. So that's one thing I would say, sir. How about you?
So for me, I'm building right on your calendar, right? And so we can, once we know what our priorities are, we're going to put that on our calendar. But this might be just as, if not more important. Protect your margin, right? And so when I say margin, that space, build buffer time into your calendar. So we think that because we have 8 hours a day, that we need to fill all 8 hours of the day. But what I'm going to encourage you to do is protect your margin, build buffer time into your calendar. Rest and reflection are not luxuries, ladies and gentlemen. They're what allow clarity and creativity to thrive. So I believe that rest and reflection are a necessity. It is not a bonus. It's not a would like to have, nice to have. I think that the rest and reflection are must haves in our day. And the only way we get that is if we proactively decide to build that margin into our calendar.
Yes, sir. It's so good. And while you have that built in, you can take some time to actually audit your calendar. And so you can ask yourself regularly. You can do some reflection daily, really. Like Neil and I have talked about that, and we have a habit of doing that. But certainly you can do a weekly check-in and ask yourself the question: if someone looked at my schedule, if they looked at my calendar where I've spent my time here, would they see my purpose or just my pressure? Would they see what I really want, or will they see just how I'm being pulled?
So this reminds me, I forget who said it, but it's been said a number of different ways by a number of people. But it says that if you show me your checkbook, well, for those of our audience who knows what a checkbook is, they say if you show me your checkbook and your calendar, I'll show you what your priorities are.
Yes.
And so when you talk about auditing the calendar, I sit there and I look at and be clear. This is not our perfect calendar that we want, how we want it to look. What Robin is asking us to do when we audit our calendar, where did your time really go? Right. So in sales, I know Darren Hardy talked about having a stopwatch on your neck. And one of the things that Jim Rohn and Brian Tracy, they believe is that if you want to double your sales, double the amount of time that you are face to face with your client prospect or a customer. And so Darren Hardy would keep a stopwatch and he would not look at it until the end of the day. And he thought that he was spending hours in front of customers, clients, and prospects. End of the day, he probably spent like 15 to 20 minutes in front of them, right? But he was doing a lot of stuff. So he was busy, but he wasn't effective. So really audit your calendar, your real calendar, not the perfect one that's in our head. And so then the one that I love, once we're looking at our calendars and we're auditing and we're building in that buffer time, I believe that we must practice focused work, right? And so the myth of multitasking, it feels productive, but it scatters our attention. And so I am just a believer that multitasking is a lie, that you're either doing one thing very well or you're doing multiple things very poorly. And so effectiveness comes from sustained focus on meaningful work. And I think that if we are going to want to have an impact, if we want to live a life on mission, then we must be focused on meaningful work.
Yes, Neil, it's so good. Just today, you've heard the thought, tackle your most important task first. And oftentimes it might be the one that you don't want to tackle first.
That darn frog that Brian Tracy talks about.
Yep. And do one thing at a time. So the idea is you finish just what you just said. The reason I repeated it is because I was practicing that today, right? And I had a few things that I wanted to get done, but I stayed on task with this one thing that took me a lot longer than what I thought it would have. And so
Mhm.
it did take away from some of the other things, but I continued on that one thing until it got done. And as I say that to our listeners, I want to say to them, you don't have to have it all figured out. You've heard Neil and I, especially Robin, share the mistakes that I've made, and this is not something that just happened for me overnight. It's something
Right.
that I have grown and I've gotten better and I've messed up and I've had to start over and so on. Like even what I'm telling you, I just practiced today. Oftentimes I would allow me getting off of it and then and getting onto something else because it was on my calendar, right? And I would get
Yeah.
off of the thing that didn't get done and get on to something else. But today I stayed focused. And so I want to tell our listeners, this is something that we grow. Some of you might be really good at it already. And this is like, hey, come on, Rob, get with the program. But some of you may be like me, where it's, you gotta just take the next step. And as you continue focusing on that, it will happen.
So Robin, on that, you mentioned having to slow down on this one thing that took longer than you expected it to, than you had planned for it to. But if we aren't careful, slowing down and doing what we know we should do, that unsexy, that eat that frog one bite at a time, there could be some guilt attached to that, especially in hustle culture right now, right? In our society. Do more, put more on your plate, don't slow down, go harder, faster, longer. How do we not feel guilty about doing what's right, but at a slower pace, maybe to ensure that it's meaningful?
Yeah, that's a good point too. You talk as we talk about this, sometimes the reason why we stay busy is because we feel guilty when we're not. We feel like we need to be doing something, man. We feel like, well, this isn't right, right? And why do we feel bad for resting? I don't know. I think maybe, we think that, we're it means that we're not doing the best that we can be doing, right? It feels like we are being lazy, or we're just kind of not being productive like we could and should be.
Yeah. And so I also think that if we aren't careful, and as much as we want to be rebels, right, we still want to be part of the herd. We still want to be part of the tribe. And if we rest, if we slow down, sometimes it feels like rebellion, right? Because the world rewards exhaustion, right? They want you to like say, hey, I'm tired, but at the same time, we want you to post that you're refreshed on vacation. Right. We've been trained to equate worth with output. And I think that's a dangerous place for us to be, for us to think that our output is going to dictate our worth, because at some point our output is going to wane, and we don't want you to think that your value is going to diminish just because your output or your performance isn't going to be up to the worldly standards or the world's par. And here's what I want to remind people. I know Robin had to remind me of this a couple of weeks ago, that rest isn't retreat, right? It doesn't mean that we're losing ground. It really means that we're recalibrating, that we're saying, okay, let me get things back in order here. If God needed to, or not needed to, but if God chose to rest on the seventh day, maybe we need to, not to keep from falling back, but just so that we can get things back to zero, so that we can get recalibrated.
Yes, it's such an important reminder, Neil. Choosing rest and focus and putting boundaries on our calendar, setting buffers, pausing. It doesn't mean that you're lazy, folks. It means that you're strategic. It means that you're preserving your strength for what really matters. It means that you're preserving your focus for what really matters. It means that you're stopping to take stock of how you are spending your time, and you're giving yourself the proper energy and frame of mind and wherewithal in order to really move forward and on what matters. That's the reality. If we're not careful, we can just go from one activity to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other. Neil, oftentimes when I see, it's usually in these big vehicles, like big minivans or, the big SUVs, Suburbans or the like. And, I see the kids in the back with the TV on. And I'm thinking to myself, we have to be careful in our society, because what happens is we go from the home, we have whatever activity it is that we have at home. And then even when we're going somewhere, we have the activity going when we're going somewhere. And then when we get somewhere, we're going to be doing an activity then. And before you know it, we just go from one thing to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other. And then how can we be doing anything strategically? Or how can we really ensure that we're doing what matters, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And so, ladies and gentlemen, if you are listening to us and not watching us, you cannot see this big grin, this big smile I have on my face, because Robin said that when you set boundaries, when you choose rest, when you focus, it doesn't mean you're lazy. It means you're strategic. And so now I have a rebuttal to everyone. Robin, they're like, Neal, you're so lazy. I'm like, man, I'm strategic. This isn't laziness. This is strategy. I really am saving my strength. I'm saving the best of me for what really matters. And so now I have a huge takeaway today, Robin. So thank you for putting those words together. So when you see me, don't think I'm being lazy, Rob. Just say,
Right on.
oh, Neal's being very strategic over there.
Right on. Right on.
And so I absolutely love it. But to our listeners who are in constant motion, but feel like they're getting nowhere, this is your moment to pause, really pause. When you finish with this episode, this podcast, just chill for a moment, right? You don't need to do more. You need to do what matters. And that's the key. The answer is not in doing more. The answer is doing more of what matters. And oftentimes that's going to be actually doing less than you're doing today.
And you were not created to grind endlessly without clarity. We're giving you permission today. You are most powerful when you actually are aligned. And alignment requires intentional space. It requires intentional action. And it requires intentional rest.
Robin and I, we want to remind everyone here of what we believe and what we know to be true. And that is that there's a big life waiting for you on the other side of busy. And it begins with the courage to slow down. So you can speed up in the right direction. So that's going to require us to slow down so we can speed up in the right direction. And if we do that, we're excited because we know we're going to hear stories. We're going to meet you. We're going to receive phone calls or emails, some reviews of the big life that you're experiencing. And that's the goal. That's the purpose of this podcast.
Right on now. Come on. That's what it's about. And so we're going to leave you with a challenge this week as we wind it down here. So one, we want you to take the time to audit your week. We talked about it a little bit earlier. We want you to take the time to do this and circle the tasks that energized you as you look back at your week, and cross out the ones that drained you unnecessarily, right? So audit your week, look at the tasks and circle the ones that energized you, and cross out the ones that drained you. And then we want you to choose one thing to let go of. So instead of a to-do, we want you to choose one thing that you let go of. Neal and I talked a lot today about margin and pausing and taking the time so you can be intentional. And so one of the things that we have to do in order to do that is let go of some things. Give yourself permission to release busy work that isn't producing meaningful fruit. Give yourself permission to release busy work that isn't producing meaningful.
So Robin, right there, you talk about the to-do list, and Robin is saying put one item on the to-don't list.
Yes.
Right. So what is going to be one thing that you don't do this week? I love that right there, because I have some ideas and I know some things that should be on my to-don't list. And so I'm going to implement that myself, Robin. What else you got?
And the last one, Neal already said so well, but we're going to challenge you with doing it, actually doing it this week. Remember, Neal and I, this is about actually change, bringing change to our lives, right? So we can talk about these things, but if we don't actually put them into play, then it really is not going to make any difference. So one of the things that we want you to do this week also is to schedule intentional rest. And so that might look like maybe taking a day of rest. That might look like after Neal talked about a buffer, after an appointment that you have, giving yourself 30 minutes of just your time. So whatever that looks like for you, not when you're burnt out. We want you to do this intentionally ahead of time. We want you to set on your calendar this week intentional rest.
So Robin shared some challenges for you this week. I'm going to put one more out there for you, and that is to share this episode with someone who's been wearing busyness as a badge. That might be you. That might be someone that you know dearly and is possibly and probably someone that you care for deeply and even love. So share this episode with them. Let them know that it's time that hustle be traded in for alignment. And we want them to know that you care enough about them to maybe give them a tool, that you give them maybe the permission from Robin and I to do things differently, to move from busyness to productivity.
And to you, our listeners, we say thank you for allowing us to speak into your journey. We believe in you. We believe in your ability to build a life that's not just full, but fulfilled. And
so Robin, here's what I know, and I didn't mean to step on it, but I'm so excited. First, I want to tell you it is always an honor and a privilege to be here on the podcast with you. But more importantly, it is an honor and a privilege to be your friend, your brother, to be your partner in all things good and transformation. And so thank you for allowing me to be a part of this.
right back at you, brother.
And so, to our audience, ladies, gentlemen, we want to remind you that we're going to encourage you to live boldly, rest intentionally, and keep building your big life. And remember that busy is loud, purpose is clear, and our ask is that you choose clarity. So, we're going to leave you like we always do, and that is that we love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time we see you or you see us, we're right there with you.
Right there with you.
Peace.
Peace.